What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Octagon Oracle Podcast, the debut podcast for the Octagon Oracle. So, I know what you're probably thinking right from the off. The Octagon Oracle, what kind of dickhead names himself the Octagon Oracle? Well, the bottom line is, I'm not professing to be any absolute expert or have any serious knowledge about the world of mixed martial arts, but I am a massive fan, and talking about this is what I want to be doing. So what I'm going to be doing, the sort of vision for the Octagon Oracle is to bring picks on a week-by-week basis. It's going to be generally centered around the UFC. We're going to be looking at, the upcoming fights and having a bit of a breakdown as to who we think is going to win the fight and why. Just to try and give you guys a bit of an insight into, or some things to think about when you're maybe looking to place your bets or, have the crack with your mates. It's just my vision on how I believe things are going to go. The Octagon Oracle seems like a catchy title, but I'm by no way professing to be, a mystic know-it-all of everything. So, look, this is a debut episode, so there may be some teething issues and some things that maybe I've got to work on as we go along, but we're going to get this one up and running now. This one's going to be a review of UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. We're going to talk about, the fights that happened, what kind of unfolded as we went along, and we're going to take a view into what's next for some of these fighters, some decisions, obviously, that went against maybe what most fans thought and felt. We're going to have a chat about that. Just before we do get started, if you do like what you hear on the podcast and is something you want to stick with, then please jump onto all of our social medias, like, subscribe, comment, and share on the podcast, which should be over on this side, somewhere down there. And also, if you're looking for social media followings, should be just below you, down there. So as you can see, we're across YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. There's obviously not too much content on there because this is the debut. We're just getting started with this thing. So we're going to see where this road takes us. What I will be doing across, TikTok and the socials, for example, is I'll be dropping short videos. I'll be doing a podcast like this one, which covers the events that have been. And I'll be also doing sort of a preview episode where it'll be a much shorter preview, but it'll be I'll be giving some picks, who I think is going to win which fights and how. Obviously, the first one for that is going to be a couple of weeks away, which seems like a strange place to start because obviously we've got Derek Lewis and Jailton Almeida in the main event. But we're going to dig straight into UFC 294 now and see where that takes us. So we'll go straight into the main event. I mean, this was one where we were all extremely hyped for this. There was a rematch between Islam and Charles that was planned. Obviously, Charles got the cut 10 days out, and Alexander Volkanovski put his hand up and stepped in instead. I mean, Volk, when that first struck me, I believed that Volk was stepping in because, he's naturally a smaller guy anyway, so the weight wasn't going to be a problem. It wasn't going to be a massive cut. He finished the first fight out stronger, and I actually thought Volk had a chance of maybe doing something, even though it was against the odds coming in at last minute notice. I got it wrong, completely wrong. I mean, terrible place to start if you're trying to profess to be an oracle, all knowing and sees into the future. But Islam was brilliant. I mean, he was just devastating. I mean, that kick was sweet, but he tried once before, and then the setup was there, and Volk just, I mean, I saw a Dan Hardy breakdown, and if you want to see any real breakdowns, not what I kind of bring you, shoot over and watch Dan Hardy, because nobody does it better in the business than Dan Hardy. He practically predicted the knockout, explained how Islam was going to, with the height advantages, was going to suggest whether to go up or down with the kick, and Volk wouldn't know whether to defend to the body or defend to the head, and that's exactly what ended up happening. And, Islam was devastating once he got him down there, and he got him hurt, and he looked great. So from Islam's side, there's an interesting conversation there. We've seen, obviously, now that he's been placed in at number 2 on the pound-for-pound list ahead of Volk. It's a tricky one, the pound-for-pound list, because a lot of people see it as what have you done for me lately? A lot of people seem to think that, if you're the guy right here, right now, you're pound for pound number one. I'm not sure if I completely agree. I get the consensus, but it's fluid. There's no defined criteria for the pound for pound list, so we're all open to our own interpretation. Now, for me, John Jones is pound for pound number one, and rightfully so, because for me, John Jones is the greatest of all time. And yes, that's a separate conversation, but as long as John Jones is active, pound for pound means that any weight class, any fighter, who's the best? Who's the best we've ever seen right now that's still active? And for me, that is still John Jones. But I think Islam has announced himself as an absolute nailed on second. He's looking phenomenal at the minute, and it's hard to see, where a defeat's going to come to. Or come from, sorry. When we look at Volk on the other side of the argument, I'm a little concerned about Volk. Obviously, we saw the press conference afterwards where he was talking about how, and even in the cage, he was saying how he needed to stay busy, and it drives him mad, and he's struggling when he's not in the octagon or he's not in camp, and it's concerning really for somebody that's had so much success. Volk's obviously made a lot of money. He's the current featherweight champ. He was attempting to be a double champ for the second time. He's up there on the pound for pound list. His achievements are endless, and he's one of the greatest that we've seen. So for him to be so reliant on fighting or unhappy when he's not fighting, it's difficult. It's difficult to listen to. It was a hard watch. It was. It's a side of Volk that we don't get to see too often, and it was kind of brave of him to come out and take that approach, but it was also a little bit heartbreaking to see, and I think it speaks a lot. I felt that Volk was coming into this last minute because he felt really confident. The weight wasn't an issue, and he just wanted to get that one back against Islam, and I'm sure that was part of the thinking. But for me, maybe he took this fight because he needed it rather than he wanted it. I think that's a big concern. And, for Volk, we're looking at Ilia Topuria is going to be next. And I know he's talking about January, but I'm concerned about that fight. I think prior to this one, I would have said that I would have favoured Volk to beat Topuria. And it's not even the fact that he got knocked out by Islam. It's obviously where his mentality or where his mental state is at right now. He's not in a position to be able to compete at the highest level of this game if he's fighting because he needs to fight rather than because he wants to fight. If he wants to be the featherweight champion and defend against Ilia Topuria and fight off these upcoming contenders, then Volk's a force to be reckoned with, and I would still favour him. Just not sure that's where he's at. I feel like he's in a bit of a bad spot, and I think Topuria is no mug, and it could be a real dangerous fight, whether it happens in January or later. I'm concerned, and early picks, I'm actually leaning towards Topuria not because I think Volk's dropped off or he's getting older, despite the fact he's mid-30s, but it's concerning, and I think he's got a lot of work to do up here before he gets back in there. But that was the main event. Islam showed, what a killer he is and how rightfully he is at the top there. So who do we see next for him? I mean, there's two clear standout opponents, one of which is Charles Oliveira, which was the planned initial fight. I really wanted to see Charles get the rematch because I'm a big fan of Oliveira. I mean, how can you not be, right? He's an absolute killer. But I'm not sure I want to see it now because I feel like I know what happens. I mean, Islam's just shown us what he does when he gets a second opportunity at somebody. And arguably, although a smaller guy, Volk's probably a more well-rounded fighter than Charles Oliveira. So it's an interesting one, for sure. The other option is obviously Justin Gaethje, the BMF, and the number one contender. And, I think that one's a real interesting one because I would favour Islam because we've seen Gaethje hurt, but we also know what Justin Gaethje is capable of. If he cracks Islam like he cracks anybody else, it's curtains. It's all over. But I would favour Islam in that fight. I think that Islam's shown that he's more than just a grappler. He's got the submissions against Charles. He's now knocked out Volkanovski, who's never been knocked out in the UFC before. So, I struggle to pick anyone against Islam at the moment. I know there's rumours of the Covington Leon Edwards winner, especially if it's Covington, but that to me actually presents more of a threat. Not Colby, because I think Islam beats Colby and probably beats him comfortably. But I think Leon's a different type of threat. And Leon's really well-rounded as well. So it's call me Brit biased, but I think that's a much more competitive knock. But we'll move into the co-main event because we've got, obviously, Kamaru Usman when we're talking about weight classes. The former welterweight champion of the world, unbeaten in so long before coming up against Leon Edwards, was winning the first fight against Leon Edwards, then bang, headshot dead, as we know. And then went into the rematch with Leon and looked a little bit hesitant. I thought Leon was great, carried out the game plan perfectly, and won the fight quite comfortably, in my opinion. But Kamaru seemed to be second-guessing himself a little bit. Now, this fight obviously was meant to be Paulo Costa against Khamzat, and I think it's credit to the UFC that they've had the main and co-main fall off and replaced them with absolute bangers. I'm going to start with Usman because he came into this late notice and very similar to Volk, the weight wasn't going to be an issue because obviously he's used to fighting at a smaller weight class, so getting down to 185 was never going to be too bad for him. And I thought he looked great, on the scales and everything else. I thought he looked like he'd filled out nicely and was, looked better for carrying that bit of weight, but hesitancy was there again. They came out that first round and Khamzat was just dominant, and I scored it a 10-8. A lot of people could make an argument that it was maybe a 10-9 because there wasn't a crazy amount of damage in there, but I think given the fact that Khamzat dominated for the best part of 4 minutes, he's got the dominance and duration in there out the scoring criteria, so that gave him the nod for me in that round as a 10-8. I actually thought Kamaru Usman won the next two. I can see no argument that Khamzat wins the second at all. I can see an argument where he wins the third, but not for me. Kamaru was winning the first 3 minutes of that final round and did more in those 3 minutes than Khamzat did with the takedown in the final two, where he kind of just laid on top of Kamaru really and didn't really cause any significant damage. And the duration wasn't there because, Kamaru dominated the first 3 minutes. So for me, I had that a draw. And I'd love to see it run back. We've seen the rankings, right? Khamzat's gone up to number 9. Khamzat Chimaev is ranked number 9 in the middleweight division and is now next for a title shot. It doesn't sit right with me. You've got Dricus du Plessis, who has just beaten Robert Whittaker, who has been the number 2 guy of this division forever. And that, to me, is far more significant than anything that Khamzat's done to date. Yes, he's beat Usman, but we're talking about an older Usman coming up in last-minute notice into a weight class. When I broke this fight down, I picked Usman to win this. So again, not doing great with my picks, the main and the co-main, for trying to introduce people into me as the Oracle. But I believe that Usman was too much. And I thought, a 3-round fight instead of a 5-round fight for the first time in 6 years nearly was going to be a massive factor for Usman, and he could just go. But I think we saw some hesitancy again from him. And Khamzat, we've seen look tired. He was blowing out his arse against Gilbert Burns, and I am one of the many that believe that if that fight goes 5 rounds, Gilbert Burns stops Khamzat. The gas tank just wasn't there. And, you kind of thought, well, maybe it's because he's cutting down to 170 and that's where it's kind of coming from. But you've got to remember, Gilbert Burns is not a big 170-pounder, and he hurt Khamzat and he had him tired. He dragged him into an absolute dogfight, and it kind of showed that Khamzat wasn't quite at the level that we thought. And then going up to 185, you would expect that would be there. That the cardio and the strength and everything else would be there. And I think we saw it in the first round. Because once he got hold of Kamaru, a dominant wrestler himself, you couldn't see, he just did well to survive, really, let's be honest. That first round, it was so dominant from Hamzat. But I think that there's a lot of questions surrounding Hamzat Chimaev for me. He's never fought a 5-round fight in a main event to date. He's ranked number 9 in the middleweight division. So how is he next? I can't see it. I understand he's a big name, and the UFC are trying to push him, and maybe that was kind of the carrot dangling at the end of the tree for this fight. The winner of this one gets the title shot next. But let's be honest, was it a dominant performance? No. I think a lot of us would concede that Hamzat was potentially lucky to even get his hand raised. So for me, there's 2 options. I don't want to see him to fight for the title. I want to see him either run it back with Usman over 5 rounds and a full camp, or I want to see the Paulo Costa fight get remade. I think they're 2 much more logical options. Sean Strickland's come out, hasn't he, and said that Hamzat doesn't deserve a fucking title shot, and I've got to say, I agree with him. It's kind of ironic that that's coming from Sean Strickland, but still, even Strickland has a better resume in the weight class than Hamzat does. It's a tricky one, really. Obviously, if this fight does get made, then we'll break it down much more close to the time. But if you'd have asked me a couple of months back, does Hamzat Chimaev beat Sean Strickland, I would have said he'd ragdoll him left, right, and centre. I'm not so sure now. Every time I see Hamzat, I become less convinced. Obviously he had the Kevin Holland win, but, it was unprofessional not making weight for the Nate Diaz fight, and then goes in against Kevin Holland, who does have some weaknesses, as we know, and it's just... I'm not sure. I'm not on the Hamzat train right now. But look, we'll see what happens next. Maybe it's a title shot. We'll break that down close to the time. But, when we're talking about divisions and, it's a bit of a mess, the middleweight division. Obviously, I think everything was aligning for Izzy and Dricus to be the next. And then obviously Sean beats Izzy, which none of us saw coming, let's be honest. And now you've got this situation here, and it's bizarre where the middleweight division's at. So that's a nice little segue to take us into the next fight on the card. Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker. When we talk about divisions that are a mess, light heavyweight is right up there. Obviously, we've had Yuri claim the belt from Glover, won that one, and in an absolute war. It was a fantastic fight, then gets injured and can't defend, vacates the title. Up steps Jamal Hill, wins the belt, gets injured, has to relinquish the belt again. Then we have Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev fighting for that. Fighting's in a draw. No one gets the belt. Ankalaev got a lot of shit for that fight, and he's kind of flattered to deceive a little bit, Ankalaev. I think he came in with a lot of hype, and a lot of people were saying, how great he was, and expectations were high. And he's kind of flattered to deceive for me. I previewed this fight with some of the guys at Combat Sports UK, who I'm also affiliated with, and we were talking about how this was probably the one where you go and get a cup of tea, because Ankalaev's just not an exciting fighter. He's had the win over Anthony Smith, where Smith injured his leg, got the broken ankle, and then he had the decision against Jan, which, he should have won, but he just never really went for it. And now we've got this one. So for anybody who didn't see the fight, A, what were you doing? Where were you? Why were you not watching UFC 294? But B, basically the fight was stopped prematurely. Ankalaev landed a knee to the head on a downed Johnny Walker. And then we're going to come into talking about this doctor a couple of times, but let's be honest, this was a shit show. So Ankalaev lands the knee. The referee instantly jumps in and declares it a legal blow. And in the end, this is the key thing for me. Immediately after that shot lands, Johnny Walker looks up from his knee, looks at Ankalaev, puts his hand up, and basically says, "What the fuck was that?" That to me, he's compass mentis. He's there. His head switched on. He knows where he is. He knows what he's doing. It was as clear as day. But obviously, the referee brings in the doctor, which is the protocol and what needs to happen. Doctor comes in and asks Johnny Walker where he is. Now, Johnny Walker since then has come out and said that obviously what he said was, "I'm in the desert," which, let's be honest, he's not necessarily wrong, is he? But he said that he wanted to say Abu Dhabi, but he wasn't convinced that was actually the right answer, just because Johnny Walker's a weird guy, man. He's not like normal people. He's just a character of it, and he's obviously got the language barrier there. It's just, for me, it's an illegal knee, right? So you got 5 minutes. So why are we calling the fight off about a minute and a half afterwards? Because you've asked him a question, which he's answered, fairly correctly. You're asking him in a different language, and which he doesn't, it's not his native tongue. It's sort of a second language to him. It was incredibly frustrating to watch, especially given the fact that the same doctor had caused an issue earlier on down the card. But I mean, for this one, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it was declared a no contest. But for me, Ankalaev lands the illegal knee and Johnny Walker's not fit to continue it. That shouldn't be a no contest for me. It should be a Johnny Walker win, and Ankalaev should be DQ'd. It doesn't sit right, a no contest. I get the concept, but Ankalaev threw the knee. It was his fault that this fight ended, whichever way you look at it, whether it was intentional or not. He cost the fans the possible entertainment value. I say possible because I don't think it would have been that entertaining, but a possible entertainment value of this fight. And it's like, well, what do you do next? Do you run it back? Is anyone really bothered? Does anyone really care what Magomed Ankalaev does next? He's got all the talent in the world, and he just isn't fulfilling it at all. Johnny Walker, I mentioned it on the Combat Sports UK podcast, but you got Johnny Walker there. I'd rather see Johnny Walker go up against somebody like Jan Blachowicz and mix that instead. Make that a fight. Put Ankalaev in with somebody else, and I still haven't looked at the rankings to see who maybe that might be, but just put Ankalaev in with somebody else, because I don't really care what they do with him, to be honest. But speaking of not caring about one fighter, one that I will be paying a much closer attention to moving forward is Ikram Aliskerov, who got a devastating performance against Wally Alves. I mean, Wally stepped in quite late, but it wouldn't have mattered. Ikram Aliskerov is a dangerous dude. If you're not familiar with the name, then go and search it up. So watch back some of his performances and where he's come from. This guy is going to be a problem. We need a ranked fighter next for him. Just relentless in the attack and absolutely smashed Wally Alves to bits, really. Right up there as a performance of the night. Extremely, extremely impressive. And then another nice one for the home crowd. Said Nurmagomedov got the guillotine choke against Muin Gafarov. I mean, Gafarov kind of just fell into it. It was a bit reckless and a bit clumsy, and I don't think Said was probably... I couldn't believe his luck, let's say, at how easy that came to him. But a nice little win for him. Then, the final card on the prelims was Tim Elliott and Mo Mokaev, our very own. Now, it's an interesting one, this one, because Tim Elliott's been there, done it, got the T-shirt, fought the very best of the best, and he's lost to the very, very best. There's names like Demetrius Johnson in there, and many others as we go along, Davison Figueiredo, etc., etc., etc. But he's lost those big fights. But he doesn't lose many more apart from the big guys, the big names in the division, or people who have gone on to be champion or were champion. So this was a big challenge for Mo, and I think he found it a big challenge. I can see an argument where he was 2 rounds down when he gets the stoppage in the third round. I didn't have it that way. I had it 1 each. there was one of the rounds where Mo. The problem was Mo was in an exciting position in both rounds at some occasion, but he just doesn't. He's not doing enough. He's not causing enough damage. He's not throwing enough submission attempts up. He's not. He's not desperate enough. And I think we saw that in the third round where that desperation was there, where maybe he realised, even if he was at 1-1, I need to win this round, and I need to win it well. But I could be 2 down, and I need a finish. I'd like to see him be busier when he's on top, but I think what we've got to remember is Mo's a work in progress. He's 23 years of age. He's done everything on the amateur scene. He's extremely talented. And I know he's got this desire to be the youngest ever UFC champion. And time-wise, it's possible. Unlikely, I would say, but possible. I think his issue is he needs a massive fight next to even be considered as being next in line for the title. So, he had the call out of Kai Kara France and a few others there, which, that's the sort of names that he needs to be shouting for because he needs a victory over one of them. I have my concerns, though. And, this isn't boxing, right? This is MMA. So if he picks up a loss, so what? That's part of the game. But I do think he will. I don't think he'll get to the title. I'd love for him to prove me wrong because I'm a massive fan of Mo. But I think he's got to trust the hands a little bit more, and he's got to be a little bit more active because there's a couple of times now we've seen him come back from compromising positions, which, mentality-wise is great. Shows he's got the stones, he's got the minerals, you've got to get him out of there, otherwise he's going to do the same to you. But that's at a certain level. I think if he leaves himself open, against, your Pantosias, your Brandon Morenos, your Brandon Royvals, Kai Kara France, your Manuel Caps, he's potentially going to leave himself in a position where he can't come back from it. I'm not saying he gets stopped, but I'm saying, these guys are much more experienced and talented than anyone he's faced to date. So, interesting to see what will be next for Mo. I expect to see him have a relatively quick turnaround. I think he'll be back out before the end of the year because he needs to be if he's going to get, that title shot before March or the end of March, which is the cut-off for achieving the dream. But yeah, extremely. I mean, the submission was great. Extremely impressed with the way that he did that, but he's definitely still a work in progress. But can't wait to see what comes next for Mo. On this note, we'll jump back to the doctors because when I say doctors, I mean doctor. We were talking about one doctor here that made a complete fuck up in the Ankalaev and Johnny Walker fight and made a complete fuck up in this one as well. I'm, of course, talking about Yavi Basharat and Victor Henry and the kick to the testicles. I mean, here's the thing. If you got a kick for any men that are watching this, if you get kicked in the bollocks and you're in excruciating pain and there's a doctor there and and the doctor comes over and basically accuses you of faking it, I think anybody who's not a mixed martial artist that is physically capable beats the shit out of that doctor. I'm not, I'm not a fighter, I'm not anything else, but I'm just a regular guy. But if a doctor told me I was faking it when I was in that much pain, I'd really, really struggle. I'd really struggle not to take action on that. So it's a credit to Victor Henry, but probably more of a reflection of the pain he was in. I mean, there's a lot of talk that he was throwing up backstage, and then he had to go to the hospital. It was a bit of a funny one, really, because the guys had a kick to the nuts, and then you see Javid Basharat claiming that he's faked it. I mean, I don't see that. I don't. That's not what I saw at all. I saw the foot land, hit the cup rode up. It was as clear as day. It was a foul, unintentional, yes, but a foul nonetheless. But again, it gets us a no contest. It puts us in a position where we've got, there's a conversation there to be had about what we declare as a no contest and a DQ again. This one, was a lot more accidental, I would say, than Ankalaev's knee to Johnny Walker's head. But it doesn't change the outcome for me. The kick was there, it landed illegally. Victor Henry was unable to continue. I get that maybe you don't want your win bonus, you don't want to declare someone a winner and give the win bonus there to Victor Henry because he's decided not to continue. But it's a conversation piece. Look, as I'm saying it, I'm talking myself out of that one because this one's a little bit different to the Ankalaev one, and maybe it's got to be a case by case basis. But we'll see what they do, whether anything changes on that moving forwards. Next one on the card I want to talk about, because I'm not going to touch on every fight. I'm just, I've picked some of the key ones for me. I've left a few out, but Mike Breeden needs a shout out on here, man. I mean, I'm watching this fight and I've got Anshul Jubilee 2-up, and he's winning the fight, and it's the first time I've seen him. It's his debut in the UFC, first Indian fighter to fight in the UFC, and I'm watching him thinking, this kid's quite talented. He's throwing some nice kicks, he's throwing some nice shots, he's landing on Breeden and seemed to maybe hurt him a couple of times early on, and then his arse fell out. I think that might be an unpopular opinion, but for me, that's exactly what happened. His arse fell out. I think Mike Breeden started piling on the pressure. I think he went to a stage where he was like, I'm going to break this guy immensely. And he just started chanting, USA, USA, USA. When he was in the ring, in the octagon there, he's chasing him around, landing shots, and then he's, started barking like a dog at him. And it was just, Jubilee you could see it on his face. He was just looking at Mike Breeden as if to say, what the fucking hell is this guy doing? And he just looked terrified to me. Like, it wasn't like it was what Breeden was doing, landing shots and attacks. I think just mentally he just broke Jubilee and he just fell to pieces. Like, I've never seen somebody freeze the way that he froze in there. Not, we've seen people come out straight out the gate, round one, and freeze. But this guy was in a flow. He was winning. Everything was going to plan, and then he just fell to pieces. But shout out to Mike Breeden, man, because he's a dog, literally, and it was a phenomenal performance to come back in the way that he did and do that. So yeah, delighted for Mike Breeden. One person I'm not delighted for, however, is Nathaniel Wood. Really, really difficult one to watch, this one for me. I'm a huge fan of Nathaniel Wood. I think he's got all the talent in the world. Is he slightly undersized at this weight class? Yes, he is. But, Nathaniel's argument is that he's got the speed, he does carry the power, and, the footwork and everything is too much for these slightly bigger guys. And I think he's right, to an extent. But what we have seen with Nathaniel is we've seen him dropped a few times in his last few fights. And I think that comes down to the fact that he's in there with bigger guys who hit harder. Now he's got a great chin and he's bounced back and recovered really well. But he's in a really bit of a tricky predicament. I was pissed off watching this fight, if I'm honest, because the amount of fouls that Mohamed Naimov had. Fence grabs, glove grabs. I think there was 3 shots to the nuts. Two in one go. It's just, there needs to be a point taken off at some point there. It would have made a huge difference. And I think, he obviously dropped Nathaniel earlier. Nathaniel came roaring back in the 3rd round and managed to drop Naimov. And I think if they got a little bit, if there's a couple more minutes left in there, then Nathaniel maybe gets him out of there. I thought, on the eye test, Nathaniel looked like the better fighter. But I had him 2 rounds down. I thought he lost the first and the second. And for me, there was no issue with how the fight ended score-wise, round by round. It was just disappointing that there wasn't a point taken off for at least one of those fouls or an accumulation of those fouls. But yeah, disappointing because, he was knocking on the door for one of those big ranked fights, and now, he takes a step back and has to kind of rebuild again, and he just seems like one of the unluckiest fighters to come out of the UK, as far as being in the UFC is concerned, at least. But yeah, look, it's disappointing for Nathaniel, but he'll brush himself off and he'll come back and we'll go again. And then the last fight that I want to talk about on this card was Shara Magomedov versus Bruno Silva. so much to say actually on this one, which might seem bizarre for a card opener, but I thought Bruno Silva was able to land the takedowns far too easily on Magomedov. That's something that Magomedov's going to have to work on. Also, I think when Bruno Silva was throwing the hands and chasing Magomedov down, Magomedov was throwing kicks back and kind of leaving himself wide open to some shots, which, Silva wasn't able to capitalize on. But I think Shara Magomedov overall looks like a real talent. The kicks were phenomenal. The damage he was actually causing from bottom position were insane. That kick to the head when he was laid down and got up off the floor, I mean, that was insane. He looks like a real talent. He's got some things to work on, yes, but it looks incredible. Yeah, it was a nice little opener for the card for me. But overall, I think UFC 294 probably disappointed, and that might be harsh because there was moments in here that were spectacular, but I think one of the problems this card had was momentum. One of the things the UFC prides itself on is that kick move, that constant moving schedule. One fight in, one fight out, one fight in, one fight out. It just, one fight finishes, you've got the in octagon interviews, brain fart for a minute, interviews, and then they're out of there, and the next fight's pretty much ready for starting. And we never really got that here. We had Magomedov against Silva went 3 rounds. You got Nathaniel Wood and Naimov went 3 rounds, but stopped constantly for fouls. You got Breeden and Jubilee went into the 3rd round. You got Basharat and Henry 2 rounds, but again, a stop with a kick and the doctor coming in, etc., etc. Then you've got Elliot and Mo nearly going 3 rounds, and then it changed. Saeed got the quick finish. Aliskerov got the quick finish. And then you pause again because you got Ankalaev and Johnny Walker and the shit show that happened there. And then you go into Usman Khamzat, which goes on 3 rounds again. And then Volk obviously gets finished in the first by Islam. And it was just kind of stop and start for me, the card as a whole, which kind of made it just lose that momentum that it normally has, a UFC event. But overall, a good card, but I think it probably didn't quite live up to the expectations, this one. But we have a week off now. Obviously, as far as what I'll be bringing you, it will be a week off, but I'll probably scatter things around a little bit on socials. I'll be dropping, like I said, there'll be a preview episode. Not sure exactly when that will be yet, but if you hit the subscribe button and the like, and could drop a comment, chuck a share in, let your friends know, ask them to come and have a watch, please, because I really want to try and build this channel. But yeah, I'll be dropping something in the build-up to Jailton Almeida and Derek Lewis, and we'll be breaking down some fights on that card, and I'll be giving some picks. It'll be a much shorter video, more than likely. The podcast reviews will, on most occasions, will be longer than the preview ones. The preview ones I'll try and keep short and sweet. It'll be more a quick flick over and giving picks. But yeah, listen, I'm really trying to build something here. I just want to get this show going. What I'll probably do for future episodes is, once I've made the picks for the Derek Lewis and Almeida's card, I'll try and keep a tally and chuck it up on the screen here, so you'll have ding when I was right and ding when I was wrong. And we'll keep a little bit of a count up there, which you might see that disappear depending how badly it starts to go. But listen, man, thank you all for joining us for this day, or joining me for this debut episode of the Octagon Oracle. We will be back with you soon. I appreciate you. Please, like I said, follow me across socials. They're all on there. This will be going up across YouTube. It'll also be going on to Spotify, Apple Play, and a few other places like that. So just to run through it for you, YouTube, Instagram is at the Octagon Oracle 00. Twitter and Facebook is at Octagon Oracle 00. And we're also on TikTok at the Octagon Oracle. So please jump onto there, drop us a follow. Obviously, whilst I'm trying to build this channel, what I'm going to be doing is anyone who drops me a follow will be receiving a follow back. And yeah, I just love some interaction. So please drop some comments on the YouTube channel, on the socials. I'm happy to have chats backwards and forwards. If you disagree with something that I've said, if you think I'm full of shit and getting stuff wrong every time, then tell me, man. We'll have a chat about it. We all love to talk. We all love to talk about this sport. So let's do that. So thank you for joining me on the debut episode of the Octagon Oracle, and I'll see you next time.